Let's do a quick review. Last time we talked about calculated fields. Just want to hit those just a little bit more. Remember when we design databases, we don't typically put calculated fields into our tables. That is a rule that can be broken, but typically we don't put calculated fields into a table. Instead, we calculate them when we need them. One way to calculate them, if it's a simple equation like this one where I'm calculating a tax, you can put it right inside your select statement and simply do the math. And this can be very complicated. In the systems class right now, there's some calculated fields that they're creating that are quite complex. The math is fairly complex. That can actually include if statements and case statements if you really need it to. It's very rare that I do that. Occasionally an if statement. But case statements can be done, and it's just a little trickier and beyond the scope of the course. But know that it can be done. You can do math with dates by using the add date function. I kind of like this function or this technique where we did an add plus. Tried leaving it out and just do a checkout date plus 4. Remember, we ran into trouble because when we hit the end of the month, it didn't spill over like it was supposed to. So make sure when you're doing the date math that you include the interval and then the measurement. Remember, these are all singular: day, month, and year. You shouldn't have any trouble. Stop me if you need to. Another very common thing we do is concatenate strings. In SQL, there is no plus operator, no ampersand operator that allows you to stick two strings together. If you wish to concatenate, you must use the concat function that is built in. The concat function takes any number of parameters, and I believe they can be any type, just like in C#. So I can have strings. Here's just a bunch of strings, but if there's a number in there, I can throw the number in there and have it concatenated as well. So this takes these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strings and concatenates them together. Typically when you create a calculated field, particularly if it's somewhat long like this, you'll give it an alias. To create an alias for a field, you simply follow it by the word as and then give it whatever name you want that's a little bit more short or more descriptive. You can do that for any field. It doesn't have to be a calculated field. So if you've got a field in a database called destination and you'd rather see it labeled city in your results, you can do that as well. Typically, though, the aliases are applied to a calculated field. There was where we talk about aliases. And the other tricky thing to keep in the back of your mind, Nathan, would you close that door, please, on you right there? Thank you. The other thing to keep in the back of your mind is these calculated fields can be used in an order by clause. So when you're sorting, I can sort by city, state, zip, that concatenated field. I cannot, however, use a calculated field in a where clause. This is illegal. Something to do with the way those commands are processed behind the scenes. When you hit the where clause, that calculation hasn't been done yet. So you can't say where the city, state, zip is like Stephen, like Stevens Point or whatever we're looking for here, Stevensville. I can't do that. That's a calculated field in a where clause, can't be done. The solution, painful sometimes it is to simply repeat the equation in the where clause. And then move on from there. But that's what you're stuck with if that's what you're trying to filter. So this is the solution to that problem. But you can, another very common mistake though, is to not use a calculated field in an order by clause and put the calculated field in there again. That works. Just more typing on your part. Maybe not so much because it's cut and paste. But you can order by a calculated field. This entire concat function could be put in there, but you don't have to. You can use the alias instead. In order to order by, though, you do have to provide an alias. An alias is for readability, but it's also for use in an order by clause, and a little later we'll talk about a having clause. It'll appear in there as well. Questions? Okay. We did talk about formatting. If you wish to format your results, normally when I'm digging around a database writing SQL, I'm not worried about the formatting of my results. Just show me the answers. If I want formatted results, typically I'll create a form, I'll create a GUI, I'll do something to take the data that comes out of the database and format it for me. But should you be generating a quick and dirty report and you want to limit it to 2 decimal places or however many decimal places, this is the way you format numbers. Use the format function that's built in. We'll talk about average a little bit later. Format the field, or this can be a calculation. And then how many decimal places do you want that answer rounded to? You can put a 0 there to get a whole number. Typically it's 0 or 2. But you can put any number there you want. Again, there's an alias, so notice the formula is embedded inside the format. So now I got a function that uses a value, and all that gets stuck together and works just fine. If you need to change the format of your dates, this should be even more rare. Most dates come out in ISO format, and most of the world is getting very comfortable now with ISO format. The year, month, day process shouldn't need to do a whole lot of formatting, but if you do want to format it here, there's a way to do it. And you can use these formatting strings for month, day, and year, and then there are more. If we follow this link, where's it going? Going out to the MySQL site, so let's let it go. Here's a bunch of other, notice it's just A, B, C, D, capitalization is important. Okay, if you want the full month name, you use a capital M instead of a little m. But there's the rest of them if you should need some fancy formatting. Questions about formatting? Okay. Then new stuff. Another type of calculation that we can do using SQL are statistical calculations, like counts and sums and averages, mins and maxes. Most of those should be pretty familiar to you. Those are the names of the functions here in SQL. One of the ones that you'll get some misleading information on the web is the count function. In the past, the SQL did not allow you to say, just count records, whatever. You had to pick a field to count. And if there were duplicates within the field, it wouldn't count them but once. And that wasn't always what we wanted. And so often we had to say, we'll pick the primary key. But if you have a 3-part primary key, then that gets complicated. And so finally, within the last 5 years or so, I think, at least for MySQL, the star has come along. The star says, just count records. Don't worry about what fields. And so when I do a count nowadays, I always do a count star. It's very rare that I count an individual field anymore because I'm normally interested in how many students have CIS as a major. And if you use the wrong field to count, you might get the wrong answer. Since I found the star, I have not used anything but. So what the count function allows you to do is count things with certain criteria. So if I wanted to display the total number of trips to Chicago, make sure my employees table is selected, it is. I want to select count star, and I can give that an alias, it's a calculation, or I can just leave it. From TBL trips, where the destination is equal to Chicago or whatever it is I want to search for. Go. There is no destination. Where the, nice. Typing what I say. Where the destination, so there's 25, and that's what you get from this, is a single number. You don't get a whole bunch of records, a whole bunch of rows. If you do a normal count type function like this, you get a number. There's 25. In programming logic, very soon, maybe this week, maybe next, we'll be talking about checking for duplicate records. We'll do a count. How many records do you have in the database that have this combination of logical keys, first names and last names? And then we typically ask, did you get a 0? If not, then this is potentially a duplicate. So sometimes the answer I want, often the answer I want is 0. How many do you have? None? Good. No duplicates. But you can use count to count anything that you want. In addition to count, there's a sum. A lot of these are very similar to what you saw in Excel or Access. Want to select the sum. Sum, you do not use a star. You must designate which field it is that you want to add up. So I might want to use, I think it says total expenses. I believe if you want spaces in your titles, you can do it, but you got to surround them with quotes. I don't recommend that because if you're creating a calculated field, you're probably going to send it back to a GUI or a business class, and the business class is not going to be real happy to find spaces in there. It'll deal with it. My advice is stick with Camelback or Camel Case. Just want to show you that you can do this, prove that it works. From TBL trips. Now, if I just did that, it's kind of misleading. But remember, my trips table is really mostly February. It's a February trip, so that might not be a bad statement. I can ask for that. And there's my total. And notice the caption is total expenses. But if you don't put the quotes around it, then the space screws stuff up. So you can't have spaces in your aliases. Typically, though, you don't want the total for the entire database because you can't, again, imagine something as huge as Amazon. And how much money do we make selling books? Well, even that's not a question for everything. That says how much money did we make selling books? So let's go back to Destination Chicago. And now the number shows just the Chicago ones. Pretty straightforward, min and max. So let's use duration, which is how long were the trips. What's the minimum duration? I would expect that to be 1 day. But if I again add the where clause for Chicago, one, as I expected. But I could swap some of these out. I think we've tripped to New York. I'm not sure. Still 1. Probably going to be 1. Let's take a look at the max on the other side. And notice these are not minimum and maximum, they're min and max. And again, when you're asking for the min or the max, you must specify a field. What happens if I do text? I don't know. It's not something I normally do. You'd think that would be an error, but I'm sure it'll wing it somehow. That's the maximum destination is Chicago. I have no idea what that means. It's obviously not maximum. Oh, with destination equals Chicago. Let's take that out, shall we? There we go. Alphabetically max. That's what I expected it to be when I got Chicago. I was a little surprised. But I said, give me the alphabetically last or largest city name or destination where the city is Chicago. Well, geez, it just narrowed it down to 1. Why would there be anything but Chicago? So that was a slight mistake. It's a little better. Can I do a min and probably now get Chicago or Atlanta? Yep. So you can do mins and maxes on strings, but it's pretty rare. You can do min and maxes on dates. Interesting. Okay, where's this 000 coming in? Why isn't that null? It will be when we get done with Unit 4. We'll go through and find all of those and change them. But what I could do is put a where clause on this and say where the trip date is not equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Notice I didn't put apostrophes or quotes around it. Makes it a little simpler. Now I get 2-1. You can do the same thing with max. The max probably doesn't need the where clause, doesn't hurt anything. There are some March trips in here, but only March 1st. So min and max work on all of them. Some really doesn't make a whole lot of difference, doesn't make a lot of sense with strings. And count, you should always be using count star. If you're reading in the book, they use different things. The book is a bit dated. That's why you have my notes, keep you current. Count star is the easiest way to get the count. We also have an average. Average is usually done on something like a number, not on a date, though I'm sure that would be interesting. We'll find out in a second. Here's my average expenses. Got the wrong label for it, but there's the number. See what happens if I do an average date. Should be somewhere around February 15th, right? Looks like it's the 18th with some weird stuff going on there, but that's interesting. So it seems to work. I've never done that. I've never asked for the average date. Typically, it's a number. So, covered all the functions. Not all of them. There's a bunch more. One of your assignments is to go research one. In other words, go out to the MySQL dev site and research a function that we have not talked about in class and figure out how to use it and share it in the assignment. These are the most commonly used ones. But what we often want to know is how many trips did I take, for instance, to each city? Not just to Chicago. It would be really tedious to say, okay, how many trips to Chicago? Write that number down on the side. Then replace Chicago with Atlanta. Write that number down on the side. Replace Chicago with New York, or Atlanta with New York. Write that number down on the side. Why can't I just get all the answers? You can by using grouping. What grouping does is it gives you your statistic. In this case, some of the credits, grouped by a different field. When you group by a field, you typically include the field in your select clause. Otherwise, how do you know which number belongs to who? So here, we're grouping by last name. So if I wanted to generate a count of how many trips to each city, still do the count, but I'm going to include the destination as well. And whether you put the destination first or last doesn't matter. Now I want the count from TBL trips. No where clause now. I could put in a where clause, like where the month is February, but that's most trips. Okay, well, let's put that in there. Where the trip date, how would I say the month of February?
Equals percent.
You're close. She wants the percent. How are we going to use, that's the wild card, right? How are we going to use a wild card? Whenever you use a wild card, you always use a like. Then 2010 dash percent. No. Yeah, they're all 2010, so we'll go with that. But I don't even have to do that. I could do a wild card and then a dash 02 dash percent. Now that one's going to give me all the Februaries and all the years. In our current data, we only have 2010, so that's not a big problem. But again, if you had a real database with 10, 15 years worth of data in it, you probably want to narrow down the year as well. So just as an example, let's narrow down the year. That's one way. Could do a between, where the trip date is between February 1st, 2010 and February 28th, 2010. Could use a greater than, less than. where the date is greater than or equal to February 1st, and the date is less than or equal to February 28th, both with 2010s on. So 3 different ways at least solve that problem. This one's probably easier. But I still need to, just because I've included the field here, it's a very common mistake. You get all kinds of trips with counts of 1 and interesting, weird results. Because I've listed a destination with a count. This is a count of all the trips. Where'd that destination come from? Last record, first record? I don't know, it's wrong. If we want a count for each city, I have to group by. That's another clause. And notice the order of the clauses. The where clause comes before the group by clause. Before we hit the end of the notes, I will give you a list of all these clauses in the order that they need to appear. They always have to appear in the right order. You don't always have to include them. I haven't had a group by clause yet, till now. But when you include them, they must appear in a certain order. And now I get a count of the trips to each one of the cities. Also note, when you group by, what's the side effect? Look at the answer. Group by does what else? Go ahead. Does that. That's not the side effect, that's the main effect. What's the side effect? Alphabetizing. Makes Val happy without me having to do a thing. You designate yourself as an SQL noob, which is short for newbie, new guy, new gal, if you sort a group by clause, because there's no reason to. It works. Unless you want to order by a different way. What if I want to order by these? Then I might want to give this an alias as a city count. Or let's make it trip count. I'm not counting cities, I'm counting trips. Trip count. And now my question I have to remember, where's the order by clause go? Let's see, way down the bottom, okay? So now I want to order by trip count. And this is a calculated field, so if you want to, you may sort by that. Because we can use calculated fields in an order by. And you know what? I want the most traveled cities first, so let's sort them descending. Same answers turned around. So if you want them sorted by the destination, don't bother even designating it, just let the group do its stuff. If you want to sort by something else, then designate that. And I'm looking up here, we want the count. Let's do what's on the side here, because these are supposed to be really well thought out exercises by your instructor, so let's see what happens here. Total salary for all employees. Is that what that says? Okay. So that's everybody. Select sum of salary as total salary from TBL employees, period. That's ugly, can't even read it. Add a format around it, wrap a format around it is how I often refer to that. And now I get a comma, that's cool. So I got 1,000,006, that's much easier to read. And maybe 0 is all I need. Then this says for non-union employees only, okay? Where, how do I designate non-union? Val? Pardon me? Not? Union member. I could say where union member equals false. That works. Remember, when you're talking about Boolean fields, all you have to do is include the Boolean field itself. If you want to reverse the logic, stick the word not in the front. And so I'm guessing that salary will go down by a third. Ooh, that's interesting. Of my 1,000,006 salary, not union members. That's not interesting. That's what I expected. I'm sorry. The non-union members, the management is getting 1/3 of that. So most of my salary goes to pay union salaries. Next thing says group them. Okay. So I'll get rid of the where and let's group. If you're going to group by union member, you have to include it in your list up here. So union member, comma. I think that's what the red squiggle's about. Either that or I got a semicolon hanging around somewhere. Group by is the syntax. You happy now? There we go. And that's the same number I had just a second ago, and here's the salary or the union member salaries. Well, that's all well and good, but the 0 and 1, if you were to show this to somebody, would be a little confusing. So let me show you real quick how we can switch this so that it says union for union members and administration or admin for the other people. You can put an if statement around this. If union member. Now this is like the inline if that we have in C#, except you actually have to include the if statement in the calculation itself. If union member, that's my condition right there. If the salary is greater than 10,000, you could put that in there. But this is my criteria. What do I do if it's true? I want to put in here union. If it's false, I want to put administration. And let's give that an alias as union. Put a question mark in there? Probably not. What if I put apostrophes around it? That's really a bad idea, by the way. That'll work, but now on the C# side, there's a question mark in the element name. That might cause trouble. It's not a great idea, but let's see if it works. So now notice that my values here are showing up differently than what's in my database. I'm converting a Boolean value to a word that I can read instead of a 0 and a 1. Using an if statement. And the if statement ought to be fairly familiar to all of you, except Kathy maybe. You haven't got that far in programming logic beginning yet, have you?
No.
Okay. So 3 parts. What's your condition? What do you do if it's true? What do you do if it's false? Just like Excel. And I can get a pretty clean looking output, and I can add the question mark in there, but that's a bad idea. We can group by multiple things. So I can group by union members and then plants, or plants and union members. The order here is important, right? If I say plants and union members, I'm going to get plant number 1 and the union salary and the regular salary. Then plant number 2 and the union salary and the regular salary. If I do it the other way around, unions, I'm going to get all the non-union salaries first, and then all the union salaries. So it does make a difference. Let's go with it here. Plant ID, and then I should also include it up here. So plant 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's each of the salaries. So you can group in multiple levels. What you're really creating here are subtotals. What's the total salary for all the admin members in plant 1? I would guess that that's 1 person. Could I add the count to this as well? Sure. So it's getting a little busy, so you come down to the next line here, and I could say I probably need a comma, because I want to add another field. So in addition to telling me if they're a union member or not, in addition to telling me which plant they're in addition to their total salary, tell me how many there are. I kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the unit. If you can dream it up and the data's there, it's a way to get it out. What you have to know is all the tools. And when it comes to SQL, it's just like programming. We had all these tools. There's if statements, case statements, while loops, for each loops, functions, arrays, all these tools you've been learning about, classes. In SQL, there are also tools. There are where clauses and order by clauses and now group by clauses. There are functions that are built in. And knowing how all those tools work and how they work together can get data out of that database. Get information out. Right now I've got information. I might question is, I might be smart enough to know that this plant, number 4, whoever that is, it's got 4 managers for 9 people. Why is that? Must be challenging people. But this is giving me information that I might not have seen on a regular basis. I didn't know there were only 9 people, 9 union members working. Well, maybe 2 of these are the president and the vice president. Oh, that makes sense. And never mind. Okay. But at least you've got some numbers coming out here to give you a feel for what's out there. Got information that you can use to make decisions. My little red line here says, can we add grand totals? Well, I've forgotten how. It's like there's a roll-up clause. Adding this clause to a group query includes the grand total in an additional row at the bottom of the query. The roll-up must follow the group by clause. Roll-up is not compatible with order by. Okay, so good information there. So here's my group by, and I want to do a roll-up. Space. Don't look like it. Let's see if it'll run. Nope, doesn't like roll-up. Adding this clause must follow the group by clause. Not compatible with order by. There's my group by. Pardon me?
With roll-up.
I'm sorry, one more time.
With roll-up instead of.
Oh, with roll. Okay, thank you. Ha. Thank you. Read better than I did. There we go. And now down at the bottom, notice there's a null plant. And it's giving me the total salary of everybody. Says admin, it's lying. Okay. But I do have a total, and there are a total of 50 people, and that I do know is correct. Be nice if we could highlight that somehow. Let's not get carried. No, there's no way to make it boldface and italicized. Wrong program. Again, you could take those numbers in a GUI and spit them out in different colors, different font sizes, different page, whatever you want to do with it. With rollup. Thanks, Steve. I missed that. Okay. One more clause. That's the having clause. The where clause allows us to filter records. Okay. This where clause up here says only include in the statistic that I'm calculating the trips to Chicago. So before we do calculations, we take the entire population of records and trim them down to just the Chicago records. Then we do the calculations. Sometimes, however, we want to filter the statistics. What if I only wanted to include plants that have, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Calculate the average expenses per trip for each employee. Calculate the average expenses per day for each employee. Average expenses for each employee. Okay? So now we're asking, how much does Miguel spend whenever he goes on trips, on average, per day? So I want to calculate an average. I heard that. So say average expenses per day. So that's expenses divided by duration. I can calculate an average formula? Absolutely. Mix and match these things however you see fit. Let's give that a name as average per day. From TBL trips. And I want to group that now by employee. And I don't have an employee in this table. In the next unit, we'll fix this. When we do multi-table queries, and names in one table, the statistics, the expenses are in another. We'll learn how to bring those together in the next unit. But for right now, let's just use the employee ID. And since I'm grouping by that, I should include it in my list up here. And I'm probably going to want to order by that so I can see who's really expensive. Order by average per day descending. Now I can't tell who these people are because of their ID number, because all I have is their ID numbers. Again, next unit we'll sort that out. But if I was really curious about these people who are over $300 here, I could go look those numbers up and find out who to call. But what if I don't care about the people who are under $200? That's normal, or that's what we would consider reasonable. A couple of $100 a day. The room costs you $150. You eat at McDonald's, good. But I want to know about the people who are over 200. I don't want everybody here. So what I really want to do is filter the statistic, not one of the fields. If you're filtering a field, that's a where clause. If you're filtering a statistic, like average or sum or count, then you use a having clause. The having clause occurs immediately after the group clause. Having, and I need to check my notes now because the question I have, because I want to say this, average per day greater than or equal to 200. But the question I have once again is, can I use a calculated field in a having clause? My gut feel is yes. Well, let's find out. Having clause allows you to control which ones, displays total credits. You're not going to tell me? How rude. Having versus where. Group statistics from being included. Restricts records. Some lame notes here, so since we can't tell, let's just try it. That worked. So the only place, by the looks of this, that you cannot use a calculated field is in a where clause. Order by, group by could be a calculated field, I think. No, can't group by a calculated field. It's going to be a regular field. But you can use it in a having clause. And now I can see all the people who are spending more than $200 a day. So the having clause removes records based on a statistic. Only makes sense to have a having clause when there's a group by clause. Group by clauses only make sense, this is a very common mistake. Group by clauses only make sense when you have statistics like averages, counts, sums, mins, max, medians, you get those later. Right? If you don't have a statistic, the group by clause is not appropriate. Some people have discovered in the past that they can do a group by to order things. Well, it's like using a flathead screwdriver instead of a chisel. It'll work, but it ain't the right tool. Like Dad would fall into it. He's not ready to roll over in his grave yet because he's not in it yet, but you might put him there if you used a screwdriver as a chisel. My dad's a woodworker. He used the right tool. Taught me that a long time ago. Same thing here. Don't use group by to sort. It's not its purpose. Use group by to give you subtotals of statistics. What else we got here? Only include Chicago. Oh, okay. So now we need a where clause. Where's the where? Where clause has to come before the group by clause. Yeesh. Where the destination equals Chicago. So now what am I saying? Now I'm saying I want to calculate the average cost per day of people who go to Chicago. Only the people who went to Chicago. So I have a big bunch of records first. I trim out all the records except to Chicago. Then I calculate the average cost per day by employee, all the employees. So if one employee has been to Chicago 3 times, what's their average cost per day? Who of them are over 2, or I think it says 300, so let's change it to $300. And there's a couple people, and I can go check them out. I mean, that's getting pretty pricey there, $700 a day when you go to Chicago. Doesn't Chicago have McDonald's? What's going on here? Yeah, but I had to go to the casino too, and I lost money. That's an expense for this trip. No, it doesn't work that way. Having versus where. Questions? Yes, sir.
Where's the, like when you made the average field and all those, where are those being stored, or are those not being stored
These?
as variables? Yeah,
Nowhere.
so they're just there.
They're virtual data. They're information. Right? They are not stored anywhere. That's why these are called views. They are a view into the data. The math happens behind the scenes, and they're here in your results. If I hit Control Enter up here again, it calculates them again and again and again and again. It does all the calculations behind the scenes over and over and over again. Simply shows you the number. Now, when you run this query, if you run it from C#, for instance, it ends up in a data table. And a data table has a bunch of rows in it, and then we can write code that goes through each one of these rows and says, give me that number. But even a data table is just in memory. It's just in RAM. It's not in the database anywhere. Here, it's nowhere. When we execute this query using PHP, using C#, those answers are stored in an array or in a table. In PHP, they're stored in an array. In C#, they're stored in a data table. And you've been learning a little bit about how to get data out of a data table. We'll learn some more about that. Good question. What else? All right, what's next? Here's the clause order that I've been showing you. They always come in this order. So if you're not sure, I'm on page something, and there it is, 11 of my current notes has the clause order. I think your book has it on a certain page as well that keeps track of, but it helps you remember this is the order you got to put them in. No questions. I paused to take a breath, so that's your chance.
That last one, order by,
Yep.
it says not roll-ups.
Right. You cannot do an order by with a roll-up because it messes things up because the roll-up, it chokes on it. I think it's even syntactically wrong. So if I do this here and now say with roll-up, you happy? No. It says it has to go after the group by clause. What about there? You happy? Seems to be. But then when I run it, I get an incorrect usage of cube rollup, whatever the heck that means. So if you're ordering by, you can't have a rollup. Remember, rollup simply gives you the grand totals down at the bottom. Let's keep plugging along. Occasionally we're going to get a question like this. Who's the person with the highest salary? Well, one quick way to figure that out is just to say select employee. What do we have? I forget field names. Is it first name, last name? Let's just do last name if we got it. Employee columns last name. So select the last name and the salary. PEL employees. Order by salary descending. What's this going to do? It's going to show me all the people in the database, all of them sorted in descending order. So if I want to know who has the highest, they'll be first. There, that guy, Cruz. 77,000. This works. But again, imagine a huge company with thousands of employees, and my C# program or my PHP program needs to know who has the highest salary. That's all it needs, just that first row. If I execute this query in C# or PHP, I'm going to get all thousands of the employees and all their salaries, and I'm going to grab record number 0 and be happy. But I've wasted a lot of memory in my data table RAM with those thousands of employees. And if it's a big company, you may overflow RAM potentially because you get too many answers. What I really want is just that top one. Well, how do I do that though? Because I can't say, well, I can say where what? Where the salary equals the max. Max what? The max salary. This better not work. Whoa. I don't get a syntax error. And we already know that it's Cruz with a $77,000 salary. And when I run it, it goes, what are you talking about? You put in a group function, that's max, and you put it in the wrong place. You put it in a where clause. You can only use max and mins in the field list. Max, mins, counts, sums, averages can only be used in the field list. So initially I looked at that and says, okay, until I tried to run it, and I said, no, not doing that. The solution to this problem is a subquery, and the solution to many problems, it seems, is a subquery. A subquery is a query that is embedded inside of another query. I want to know the max salary, but it has to be in a field list. So what I'm going to do is create a query inside of a query. Your subquery must be surrounded with parentheses, and your subquery is usually attached to a where clause. So this says, first of all, notice the parentheses, just like in math. What do we do first? The stuff in the parentheses. So the stuff in the parentheses, this query is executed, and it returns to me the value 77,110, whatever Cruz's salary was. So this parentheses becomes 77,000. And then this outside query becomes select this name and salary for employees where the salary equals 77,000. That's a subquery. And this subquery, the trick here though, is that the subquery in this unit, next unit the rules change, in this unit the subquery must return a single value because we're using equal signs. If this returns more than one row, everything goes to heck. Doesn't work. Until the next unit. But for right now, in this unit, your subquery returns not even just a single row, but a single value. Whoa, where'd that guy come from? Did I forget to scroll when I was looking at the other stuff? Wow, I think I had somebody's name in here, last name in here, and I wasn't grouping by. Now I got a different answer. What'd that happen? I have to rewind my recording and see what I had in there because that's weird. And I'm not sure that agent is the right guy. Let's find out. When I run this one, somebody else. Because here I have a statistic and I have a group by clause. But I don't have a group by. This is not a legal query. It works, it runs, it gives you an answer, but it misleads you, as you see. Because I have a max in a different field. If you have a statistic in another field, that implies you're grouping. This does not give me the name and max salary of the person with the max salary. It gives me a name. Whose name? First name? I don't know. First one in the database? Last one in the database? Don't know. But it gave me an answer. Now you know why I give you the results set. So you all discovered those, I hope. On my website, for these assignments, I have given you the result sets. And by the way, if you downloaded these master files, Kathy pointed out this to me yesterday. If you downloaded those master files before yesterday morning about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they're the wrong ones. They're old. Download them again, get the right set to import. They're okay on OneDrive. But here's the answers to all the queries. Oh, cool. Sort of. I won't tell you how I got there. But if you get the same answer I do, there's a better than 50-50 chance that you've got the right query. There are still ways to get the right answers with the wrong queries. Sometimes you get the right answers, but because of the limited data we have, 50 records or whatever, you might have the wrong criteria. But at least you'll know you're pretty much on the right track. Like here, when I was asking what was the name and salary of the person, you got an answer. It's 81,000 even looked okay, but it was the wrong name. And if we looked into all of the records, that's the query I ran before. Where's my 81,000? There. That's goofy. Why was it scrolled off the screen? But this is what I ran before, but it was scrolled off the screen, so I didn't see it. Then I ran this one. I got the 81,000, but I got a completely different name. I got this person. Agent is not even linked to that salary. Why did it pick him? Is he the first person alphabetically? I don't know. The correct way to do it is using a subquery. So if I want to find out who is the minimal, who's the least paid administrator, and what are they getting paid? Subqueries can be as complicated as you need them to be, but they can only return a single value. Then you can use them in a where clause. It could be surrounded by parentheses. Order by clauses here doesn't make any sense because it only returns a single value. Why would there be an order by? But what if I wanted to order this? Well, even this statement doesn't look like it. Well, it might. Why might I want to order by this? There's only one. That seems dumb. Well, how did you know there's only one? How about if I have two employees with the same minimum salary? They both show up because this where clause says, give me the name and salary of any employee whose salary is $41,125. It could be 2 or 10. There could be more. So there, the order by clause still makes sense. But again, remember the parentheses say, do this first. Calculate the minimum salary of non-union members. And use that in the where clause of the outside query. This is where single table queries and definitely where multi-table queries start getting a little more complicated. Trying to figure out, do I need a subquery? And if I do, now we got two queries to be syntactically correct. And by the way, you could run just this one, right? And get one number. Say, well, that seems to work. And then, so test the inside, make sure that works. And then plug it into the outside query. Build things in pieces, just like we do in programming. Okay, display the name and salary of the union member. Well, that was lucky. Display the name and salary of the person with the highest salary. I already did that. Name and salary of the union member with the lowest. I thought we did that. Name, salary, union member, lowest salary. Duplicate. Display the destination and cost per day for any trip over the average cost per day, sorted by cost per day, lowest to highest, highest to lowest. Whoa. That sounds complicated. So I want the destination and cost per day. Let's take it apart. Display the destination and cost per day. So select the destination, comma, cost per day, which is expenses divided by duration as cost per day. For any trip over the average cost per day. Uh-oh. So my where clause says greater than where we are greater than the, oh, wait a minute. If we got an average, we got to do a subquery. If the average is part of your where clause, you're going to need a subquery. Okay, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put a semicolon there. I'm going to say select average cost per day, which is expenses divided by duration from trips. Average cost per day is $163. I want to know a list of destinations and expenses, and I could put employees in there. I could add anything else I need that is greater than this. Where the cost per day, oh, darn it, can't use that in a where clause, so I have to do expenses divided by duration is greater than the average expenses. You can see it actually reads halfway decent. I know that the average is 163, so I expect that every one of my cost per days is going to be greater than 163 in this. Looks like it. Every trip over the average. How many did I get? 87, and I know, how many trips were there? 300 trips? Does that make sense? $300 trips. When I said, give me a list of all the ones that are greater than average, I only got 83. 7. Seems a little low. You would think that half of them would be above the average and half of them would be below the average. Welcome to statistics. Doesn't always work that way. What this tells me, if the average is 163 and there's only 87 above that, tells me there's a lot of high cost trips that are skewing my average. Some of these really, really high ones are messing up my average. But this is not a statistics class. So hopefully I've got the right query there and I'm not blaming it on the statistics. I think that's the right query. And then finally, this says sorted by cost per day, highest to lowest. So I can do an order by. And notice again, I'm building these in pieces. Order by cost per day, that I can do in an order by clause, descending, highest to lowest. There are 87 trips above $163. That means there are 213 below. Interesting. Display the city and the average cost that is the highest average cost per day. Whoa. Okay. We'll make this the last one for today. No, maybe not. We'll do that last one too. Display the city. So select the destination and the average cost per day. Where the average cost per day, and I'm abbreviating here and I shouldn't, so let's do the average cost per day. Paste. Is equal to, oops, wait, I can't do that. The highest, what's a max average cost? Wait a minute. Can't put a max in the criteria on the right-hand side. So I have to do a subquery here. I got to find the max. Let's do that query first. Select the max cost per day. Select the city and average cost. I have to do it group by here. So I want the city with the highest cost. Per day. Should have practiced this one. It's tricky. Destination. So none, since I now have a statistic and another field, that means I need to group by at the very least. Group by destination. So this is going to tell me doesn't tell me. It tells me the highest cost, the average cost per day for going to these cities. But I want to order by. The average cost per day. Or the max cost it. What? Read that again. Display the city and average cost with the highest average cost. So I don't want the max cost. I want the average cost. It's better. I thought those look kind of high. Okay, Cleveland. Cleveland costs us $230 per day on average. It doesn't sound like a good place to go spend your money, but anyways. Cleveland has the highest, so what I really want is Cleveland. That's the answer that I want. but I only want the one. So I want the highest of those. One way we can do it, and it's listed here, is a limit one. In MySQL, you can put in a limit. How many rows do you want in the result set? One. Okay. That's cheating. It's cheating because limit one is only available in MySQL. It's not an access command. It's not an Oracle command. It's not available everywhere else. So it works here, but it doesn't work everywhere. So that's one way around it. So again, this gives me everybody. But I want the maximum. And I don't remember how to do it. Still haven't figured that one out, so I'll come back to that and share it with you. But the last thing in my notes here says we can use subqueries to also link tables together. It's kind of a convoluted way of doing this. There's a better way. That's what the next unit is all about. Right, but we can say select everybody from TBL employees that work in Coloma. That would be something like where plant ID equals no, the ID is not plant is not Coloma. But where the plant ID equals, select the plant ID from TBL plants, where the plant name so here's my subquery. Get me the ID number of the plant named Coloma. Then use that ID number in the where clause here to give me a list of the people who work in Coloma. So I happen to know that it's one. Coloma is plant number one. So this query figures out the one, and then this one says, give me a list of everybody who's in plant number one. Maybe. Employees. And now in my result set, I have 12 rows out of 50 on 4 plants each. That makes sense. But notice they're all plant ID number one. Okay, so you can use a subquery to connect tables that are related, that share a field, because the only way this works is my employees table has a plant ID and my plants table has a plant ID. That's that linking field that ties the two together. You can use a subquery to not know the ID number. Now, how hard is it to go look it up? It's not. Just put a 1 in there. But this shows you a different way of tackling that problem. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to try to solve that problem with this one here. It could be that it can't be done, but I'll try to solve that, and I'll get back to you.